We all have certain experiences when a product solves a problem so thoroughly and elegantly that it lifts a weight off of our shoulders that we didn't even know was there. Dropbox did this with file storage. Slack did this with group collaboration. Zencastr does this for recording podcasts. Before I used Zencastr to record my podcasts, like most podcasters, I used a Skype plugin. There were a number of inconveniences in the podcaster workflow that you get from using Skype, and Zencastr solved all of these by creating a podcast recording tool in the browser and presenting a simple user interface. Josh Nielsen, who built Zencastr, joins the show today to talk about the challenges of building a podcasting tool in the browser and the new technologies that make it easier, such as WebRTC. We also discuss a whole lot of other things around the podcasting industry and some other things. Josh and I got along really well, obviously because his tool is awesome and he built it for people like me. We'd love to get your feedback on Software Engineering Daily. So if you get a chance, please fill out the listener survey, which is available on softwareengineeringdaily.com/survey. Also, Software Engineering Daily is having our third meetup, Wednesday, May 3rd at Galvanize in San Francisco. And the theme of this meetup is fraud and risk in software. We're going to have some great food, some engaging speakers, and a friendly intellectual atmosphere. You can find out more at softwareengineeringdaily.com/meetup. Now let's get on with this episode. For more than 30 years, DNS has been one of the fundamental protocols of the internet. Yet, despite its accepted importance, it has never quite gotten the due that it deserves. But today's dynamic applications, hybrid clouds, and volatile internet demand that you rethink the strategic value and importance of your DNS choices. Oracle Dyn provides DNS that is as dynamic and intelligent as your applications. Dyn DNS gets your users to the right cloud service, the right CDN, or the right data center, using intelligent response to steer traffic based on business policies, as well as real-time internet conditions, like the security and the performance of the network path. Dyn maps all internet pathways every 24 seconds via more than 500 million trace routes. This is the equivalent of 7 light years of distance, or 1.7 billion times around the circumference of the Earth. With over 10 years of experience supporting the likes of Netflix, Twitter, Zappos, Etsy, and Salesforce, Dyn can scale to meet the demand of the largest web applications. Get started with a free 30-day trial for your application by going to dyn.com/sedaily. That's dyn.com/sedaily. After the free trial, Dyn's developer plans start at just $7 a month for world-class DNS. Rethink DNS. Go to dyn.com/sedaily to learn more and get your free trial of Dyn DNS. Josh Nielsen is the creator of Zencastr. Josh, welcome to Software Engineering Daily.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jeff.
So Zencastr is a way to record podcast episodes from the browser. And before I found out about Zencastr, I used Skype to record my interviews. What are the problems that come with podcasting on Skype?
Well, Skype has been really cool for podcasters because it lets you have a guest from anywhere in the world. But the problem is, when you record, the pre-existing tools to record Skype calls recorded you in really great quality, but your guests sounded as if they're being recorded through Skype, which would have, compression artifacts, or if your internet is having problems, you could have complete dropouts. And so it was a really big pain point for podcasters to have these remote guests or co-hosts and get really high quality audio.
Now, podcasting has been around for more than a decade. Why was Skype the standard for so long, or arguably still is the standard?
Well, basically because there weren't a good alternative solution. There's always been something called the double ender. People in radio have done this for ages, where instead of recording through the phone or through Skype, you record each person on both ends, which that works really well. You can record in studio quality. But the problem is, if you've got a one-off guest each time, it's hard to train them as to how to do that on their end. And then you got to hassle with getting them the audio and back and forth and exporting it and sending it. So it's not that you couldn't do this, it just wasn't easy to do. And the reason why there wasn't a better solution up until now is that basically the browsers didn't have the option, the ability to record from the microphones until just, the past couple of years. And that was the inflection point that made it possible, so that now you can just send a link. It records them. They don't have to install anything. They don't have to learn anything. You hit record as the host. It records everybody locally. It sends it to your Dropbox account, friction-free.
Before you started working on Zencastr, you were trying to build a browser-based digital audio workstation. Why was that too hard?
Well, I think building any kind of digital audio workstation is pretty challenging, but there's still, the web audio API in the browser is still shaping up. There's still some things that you just can't do, and, there's still...
Like what?
Well, for instance, there's not a way to... They're working on this. I think they're calling them audio worklets, but there's a lot of things with audio you need to happen really fast, and you need to happen on time, and JavaScript doesn't do that very well. And so what you need to be able to do is to basically hand off that part of the processing to the native implementation on the computer to run it in native code. And right now there's not a way to build your own custom audio node that runs natively. You can build your own custom node that runs in JavaScript, but there's inherent performance issues with that, and they're working on fixing that. So,
also sounds like something WebAssembly could help with.
There's a lot of cool stuff coming out. I think within the next 5 years, 2 years, 5, depending on how things move a little bit slowly with the web standards and stuff. But
that's true.
Eventually, I think you're gonna have Ableton Live in the browser, because it just makes a lot more sense to have it all connected. You can much more easily collaborate and share and do all those things. So it's an exciting time, but it's a little bit early.
Yeah, not to mention, cross-platform. I still use FL Studio, and that's a Windows-only tool, and so I have to switch to my Windows machine every time I want to work on music. But I guess we're still a ways off from that. So you eventually started Zencastr because you were looking for a more feasible and focused project. Describe the process of transitioning off of that digital audio workstation project and starting Zencastr.
I basically just kind of left it on the side. The process of actually making that decision was, I'd probably still be working on it to this day, except for I found out I was having a kid. And that totally changed the calculus in my mind as far as like how much time I had to get to a path to revenue and all this stuff. And so I started thinking, okay, how can I take what I've learned and what I'm doing and apply it to something that is maybe a bit simpler, something that has a more, well-defined business model. There was a point in time as I was working on this stuff that someone had mentioned that they weren't sure about the direction I was going, but they know podcasters have a problem collaborating and sharing audio and this and that. And I had kind of just stuffed that in the back of my mind. It was more fun to me to work on this, music stuff. But once I was like, okay, maybe I need to worry more about just making some money, I went back to that idea and I started interviewing some podcasters and really learning about the problem. And I realized that A, there's a really big problem here, and B, there's a brand new opportunity to solve it that didn't exist before. And that's a great time to get in to a problem, because when the technology changes, there's a vacuum in the market. And Zencastr was literally the very first player to build something like this in the browser.
What were the problems that the podcasters you spoke to enumerated?
Basically that generally it was people who had one-off guests that were the most frustrated with this, because it was hard to teach those people how to do the double-ended recording themselves and get the audio and all this and that. Also, They were coming into I had one guy tell me, he was like, we were thinking about, basically, we want to have a guest this week, but it's going to be such a pain to like teach them how to do it. The recording with Skype quality sucks so bad. So they're like, we'll just not have a guest this week. So they were not having people on their show and just doing their co-host chat just because it was, they didn't have time or they didn't want to take the effort to do it. And I was like, okay, well, I think we can solve that.
Was there a browser innovation that allowed you to build this? Because you would imagine that people have looked at this problem before and said, no, it's too hard, or I can't think of a right way to do it, or what had changed around that time technologically that gave you the wind at your back?
Yeah, it was basically two things. It was the web audio API, which allows you to kind of chain and process audio through audio nodes. And then it was the WebRTC API, which allows you to access the microphone and get a live stream of audio from there. And then subsequently you can connect people in a VoIP call, like, similar to what Skype does when you hop on with someone in Skype.
I had Feros Abukadije on the show a while ago, and he was talking about WebRTC. That was the first time I had heard of WebRTC, and he built WebTorrent, I think is the name of it. It's a torrent player in the browser, so you can get any torrent link and play it in the browser, like a video or a song. And then you're talking about using it for Zencastr. It makes me think that WebRTC is something that's quite important. Can you talk more about what were the difficulties to getting WebRTC to work? Why did it take so long? It seems like microphone and audio in the browser, shouldn't this have been around since a long time ago?
Well, yeah. So we've actually met, and I actually used one of his libraries in Zencastr. So he's a prolific programmer and very good at what he does. Simply, WebRTC stands for Web Real-Time Communication, and that can mean a variety of things. It basically, instead of having, like, if you want to have a really snappy connection to a peer, before WebRTC was out, you had to have a socket server that would connect everybody, and all the messages would go through your server and it would shoot them back to all the people in your session or whatever. WebRTC lets you basically introduce two peers and then let them connect directly to each other. And at that point, you can, and it has channels that can be dedicated for video, for audio, and just for data as well. And so it's kind of a lot of things going on at once. Like, because it's going to try to allow these video and data channels, it allows you to get access to the microphone and the camera on the computer, which was never possible before without a plugin. So it gives you that. The first version of Zencastr did not even use any of the peer-to-peer signaling. It didn't connect you in a VoIP call or anything like that. All it did was use WebRTC to access the microphone and just recorded you, and you still were intended to use Skype or Hangouts to actually hear each other in real time. And so just that was really cool, being able to access the microphone without a plugin. But, it made sense to go ahead and use it more fully and actually do the VoIP call and remove the need for Skype at all. Yeah, but as you've seen, there's lots of other applications, because you can basically create a peer-to-peer mesh network using this technology. And so things like WebTorrent are possible, which is really neat.
You started Zencastr in 2014. How long did it take you to build a minimum viable product?
Man, it took longer than I had hoped. I think I had something that I guess you could call it a prototype. I don't know if you'd call it an MVP. Within like 3 months of starting. So I think I'm really bad with time and dates, but I think I started in, February or Marchish, and by May I had something that I was showing like the really early people that I had talked to about it. The hard part was it only took 2 or 3 months to get something that worked in ideal circumstances. The real difficult part was getting something that worked and was reliable and under all the situations where things could go wrong, like the internet goes out or somebody's computer crashes or whatever it may be. And so I had to spend a lot of time into figuring out, how do I make this redundant? How do I make it fail like a escalator, not an elevator? And in the end, that's why I have, there's like several kind of fallback plans built into the system to where now at this point, like your computer could get struck by lightning and you'll still have all your audio. You'll still have all the audio backed up to like the last 30 seconds because it's as we're talking right now, it's actually streaming the audio to your Dropbox account every 30 seconds.
It is. Okay. Then why? Okay, it's streaming the MP3 and then it's storing the WAV file in my browser cache, or what exactly is going on with the WAV file? Or just, yeah, tell me more about that.
Okay, so as we're talking, it's saving two versions of the audio. So it's saving the raw PCM version of the audio in 16-bit like WAV format to an IndexedDB database in your browser. It's taking that, and then it's taking that audio and it's transcoding it to MP3 on the fly using an MP3 encoder. And then it's saving that to another IndexedDB database in your browser. And then every 30 seconds or so, it sends the latest piece of the MP3 to your Dropbox account so that you've always got that as a backup. And it's also just saving all this stuff into memory. And so if your memory gets wiped, you still got it in IndexedDB. If your hard drive crashes, you've still got that MP3 backup on Dropbox. In a nutshell.
Dice.com will help you accelerate your tech career. Whether you're actively looking for a job or need insights to grow in your role, Dice has the resources that you need. Dice's mobile app is the easiest and fastest way to get ahead. Search thousands of jobs from top companies. Discover your market value based on your unique skill set. Uncover new opportunities with Dice's new career pathing tool, which can give you insights about the best types of roles to transition to. Dice will even suggest the new skills that you'll need to make the move. Manage your tech career and download the Dice Careers app on Android or iOS today. And to check out the Dice website and support Software Engineering Daily, go to dice.com/SEDaily. Thanks to Dice for being a continued sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. And if you want to support the show and check out some new career opportunities, go to dice.com/SEDaily. Interesting. You mentioned the fail like an escalator, not like an elevator. That's a pretty good phrase. I have not heard that before, but I understand what you're saying. If the power to the escalator turns off, you can still walk up the stairs, but that's not true with the elevator. Elevator just has a complete failure. And to me, this just seems like the entire thrust of what Zencastr is. I look at the interface, and it looks like the same thing it was in 2014, or in, I think, 2015 is when I first started using it. But I know that this is like a Dropbox. It's like you look at it and you're like, oh, this is so simple. I could build this in a weekend. Of course, Google made the mistake of saying that they tried to copy Dropbox. Google Drive is not nearly as good as Dropbox. I think Apple and Microsoft have done the same thing. You can't copy Dropbox. You probably can't copy Zencastr.
I mean, it's not easy. It's more complicated than it looks, but it's not impossible. So it took me probably, I ran the service for free for about 2 years before I started charging for it, just because there was so many. Part of the thing was when I started building Zencastr, it actually wasn't possible to make it happen at the time. It became possible as I was building it.
Oh, okay.
And I didn't know that. And so, at least in its current form. And so, there's been a lot of kind of going back and forth with, okay, what updates are coming in what browsers and how am I going to make this work? And, big props to the developers at Chromium and Mozilla. They've done a really great job of, moving this forward, in a way that's, keeps it stable. But, there's been a few hiccups here and there. But so I've actually kind of had to really keep an eye on things. And that's been a big part of the, why it took a while, is I was kind of waiting for the browser ecosystem to mature as I was building it. I could have started charging probably sooner than I did, but honestly, I was a little bit more comfortable in a beta because there's less pressure. When things went wrong, I could just be like, beta.
For sure. For sure. Things went wrong for me occasionally, and because I was using it in beta, and I was like, well, I have no right to complain. I never lost anything because I do client-side backups, and it did scare me a little bit. But once you switched off the beta after going for so long, I was like, okay, it's probably in a state where I can trust it at this point.
Yeah. That was pretty important to me because it's a service that if it fails, it's a big deal because you're never gonna have that same conversation again, and so something's been lost. If something gets lost, it's lost for good, and that's a lot of pressure.
How long would it take you to write it if you were writing it from scratch today? How long would it take you?
Well, I was thinking about this today because, funnily enough, a lot of open source projects have kind of risen to the surface around this type of thing. If I had probably waited 6 months to start building it, I probably could have shaved 6 months off of my time that it took me to build it, because I built a lot of stuff myself that nowadays you can just go grab a library that does it for you. But now I understand a lot of the inner working bits better, so I was probably better off for it. Man, if I was to rebuild it now, I'm not a very productive person, to be honest. It takes me a while to tinker around and get things done. But I would say, this is funny because this is what I originally thought it would take me is 3 months to build it. And that was way off. So I don't know.
Well, you think 3 months at this point?
I think so. Now that I know all the stuff that I know, probably maybe 3, 4.5, something like that.
Well, what's the most time-consuming stuff along the last mile? Is it browser compatibility with Safari on Windows or something?
The stuff that I've been working on recently, I actually recently hired a JavaScript performance expert to come in and audit the whole recording pipeline, and because we're still having problems with if someone comes on Windows 7, and that generally tends to mean they've got an older and slower computer. There can be issues where they're missing samples and things like that just because it can't keep up. So, there's still stuff to work on. I definitely wouldn't want to start over now, but yeah, that's actually going live this weekend is a huge performance update. So
that's great. Wait, so is that why? So there's occasional times where I do a recording with the guest, and I think that this is correlated with the guest being on Windows or perhaps Linux, where the MP3 is fine, but the WAV file will be a 15-second audio clip repeated over and over and over again. And it's what kind of corruption happened there?
Yeah, that's what this update is addressing. That what happens there is...
And by the way, for listeners who are skeptical of Zencastr after I say that, that's the only egregious bug that I've encountered that I can recall. And it's not even egregious because you get an MP3.
Yeah, the MP3 backup isn't affected by that, but the WAV recordings can be. What happens is the in-memory copy of the WAV is fine, but the version that's getting saved IndexedDB was having on slower computers, it was having issues where, because it wasn't executing fast enough, some of the buffers were getting overwritten in chunks by, I don't want to get too technically into it, but it was a misunderstanding that I made some bad choices on how I was gathering this audio and then merging it together because you have to kind of collect these chunks and then until you have a big enough chunk to save it, and then inside of there some stuff was getting overwritten. But now we figured out exactly why.
There was some performance bounding on worse computers that prevented the buffering process from working as well as it did when you were testing it.
Exactly, yeah. And it only manifests itself if your WAV upload originally failed and you had to rely on that IndexedDB backup to retry the upload. So it didn't happen very often, but yeah, when it did, it was a big bummer because, yeah, your WAV file is basically unusable. And so it took me I couldn't figure out why it was happening, and I got on Hacker News a while ago. Someone was talking about JavaScript performance, and I was like, hey, if any of you guys want some contract work, I need some help. Yeah, I found a really great guy that knocked it out in less than a week. He's like, yep, here's your problem. Let me get it fixed for you. So it was great.
Oh, So you've hired somebody as a contractor full time. No, are you like giving them equity or anything?
No, this was just a temporary contract for hire kind of a thing.
Okay.
All right. I can't afford them full time.
Right. Okay, so you release it as a beta product, and what happened in between the beta release and the production release? Like, was it fixing small things and shoring up small errors, or was there any major shifts that you made?
It wasn't a lot of major things.
I guess WebRTC is in that timeline.
Yeah, well, yeah, I added the ability for I completed the loop where you could do the calls. A lot of it was evolutionary rather than revolution. The main core idea behind the app stayed the same, and the architecture did. It was just dotting the T's, or dotting the I's and crossing the T's, and adding more functionality and features, that people were asking for. Nothing crazy changed, but it took me so long to go from beta to being paid, in part because there was just a lot of little, writing an app is like writing a novel. You have to make so many little decisions to get to the end point. But also at this point in time, my life was really busy. I'd gotten married, I'd had a kid, I lived in Australia, New Zealand, and Thailand. We were traveling, and I didn't have any funding for this, and so I was doing contract work part-time the whole time through this, until maybe just 3 months before I launched. And so, I was still working over 40 hours a week on Zencastr, but I would have been working, 60 or 80 if I hadn't had the other job.
So the way Zencastr works today, I open up an account, I connect it to my Dropbox, I make a new interview, I send a link to that interview to my guest, and then we have an hour-long conversation. So you mentioned some stuff around the streaming and the IndexedDB, and is there anything else interesting going on in the back end during that process? Or like, what are some of the failover things that are going on, like while that setup is occurring and while that hour-long conversation is proceeding? What are some things that might occur maybe during times of network blips or, yeah? I
mean, I kind of covered like the fallback plan of right into the memory and then to the database and then to Dropbox. I'm trying to think of like what other interesting bits are going on, but as well as that. I mean, so the WebRTC connections are a bit more fragile than, say, your like socket connection to the server. So I actually don't make heavy use of like the data channels in WebRTC to send stuff, because I could do the chat and all the other messaging through that. So you still have a WebSocket connection that handles like sending the record event to everybody and the mute and raising your hand and the chat and all that stuff. In theory, it's architecturally not too complicated, to be honest.
Interesting. So what are the bugs that that still exist? Are there anything, or do you feel like you're just in the mode now where you can just expand feature-wise?
No, there's still some I would say some pretty high priority issues right now. One of the problems that we're having is VoIP. Like if someone gets disconnected from the VoIP call because their internet connection drops out or something, occasionally people can get stuck into like this loop where they keep trying to reconnect. And I think the reconnection signals are getting out of sync and it never reconnects successfully, and unless they like refresh the page. That's one that we're kind of dedicating this week heavily to getting that resolved. Man, last week we had a bunch of issues with like the post-production service, which I guess that's something I haven't brought up yet. Zencastr just records all the tracks separately, but then after that you can opt to have them mixed together and have the audio conditioned and make it sound nice in one final track for you to publish with. I use a third-party service for that called Auphonic.
I've used Auphonic. Good service.
Okay. Yeah, they're really good. I've written like FFmpeg audio stuff in the past, and I was tempted to do that with Zencastr as well, but Auphonic has done a really good job of adding a bunch of kind of like AI-powered audio enhancements to your track that would have probably taken me a lot of time if I could have even accomplished it to do. So one of the things a lot of people really like about Zencastr is how good the post-production stuff sounds, and that's basically because I pay someone else to do it who's focused solely on that piece. But I had a bunch of issues with like Dropbox because I'm using each host's Dropbox account. You can run into a lot of issues where like I've uploaded the audio to the Dropbox account, but then they like move it or they reconnect to a different Dropbox account by accident, and then the audio is inaccessible from me when I'm trying to run the post-production. I'm actually in the process of moving away from using Dropbox as like the canonical store of the audio.
Really?
Yeah, because it's caused too many problems like that. And Dropbox doesn't have any meaningful response to support requests.
Are you switching to S3?
I'm actually going to start using Google Cloud Storage.
So the Google equivalent of S3.
Yeah. I actually did sign up for S3 and I was going to use it, but because Dropbox is just a wrapper around S3 anyway. But
right.
They made it kind of difficult to do what I need, which is upload files in a streaming manner that have an unknown length ahead of time. There's no easy way to do that with AWS or with S3.
Fascinating.
Yeah, you have to like start using their Lambda service and like copying the chunks over and then
what a disaster.
Putting them together your own at the end. And whereas
Google you can just stream it.
Yeah, Google has this thing where you can basically just say, I don't know how big this file is, but I'm just going to keep sending you chunks, and then when I'm
That's
done,
awesome.
Put it together. So in theory, I haven't actually done it yet, but it looks like I can do that. So that's the direction we're heading.
Is that like the big architectural thing on the map? Because that was one thing I was going to ask about, is like, why do you use Dropbox? Like, I mean, I understand why you would use it for the MVP, but like once you scale it to where you have a bunch of people, like maybe you should put it in S3, but like, yeah, obviously Google Cloud Storage makes more sense if you can stream it to that. But is that the big architectural thing that you're focused on right now, or the big feature that you're focused on?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big upcoming things, because one of the pain points for podcasters, aside from just getting the recording stuff done, is, okay, what do I do with my audio now? If you're not a seasoned podcaster, there's still this Byzantine process involved of like getting your audio hosted and the RSS feeds and getting it onto iTunes and all this stuff. So I'd like to be able to help with that as well, which I can't really do with the audio being on all these different Dropbox accounts. And I'm also trying to offer like network services for podcasting networks. And so I need more control over the audio, and I'll be able to offer more and better services once I do that. And so, yeah, that's something I'd like to get done like this
Interesting.
quarter.
So what does a roadmap look like for that? So if you get people recording in Zencastr, the audio is getting streamed to the Google storage, which is just basically like S3. You've got the files hosted now. And then what do you do? What's the next thing on the product roadmap?
After we move our storage solution, I'm still trying to decide a little bit. There's so many different directions that it could go. There's a lot of, because the podcasting ecosystem there's tons of businesses around it, and trying to figure out, and because I have people at the very beginning, it's easy for me to just add follow-on services that as needed. And, people seem to prefer to not have to use all different kinds of services if they don't have to. So, there's opportunities, I think.
So what services do you think are the most onerous extra? Because I mean, I'm very familiar with some of these external services that are annoying to use. What are the ones that seem the most annoying to you?
Well, I don't know if this is one of the pain points that I think a lot of podcasters have, is they can't get deals with advertisers because they're not big enough. And a survey that I sent out a while back, one of the questions I asked is, do you advertise and do you want to? And 80% said they don't advertise, and 60% said they do want to. And so that sounds like a pretty big gap of what people want versus what they're getting. So I think there's maybe some opportunity to help out there. But, I'm still weighing that out, because it's a totally different type of business than what I'm in right now, and I don't want to lose too much of my identity there. I think there's a lot of opportunities to make more interesting, it'd be cool if you could have an audience in your Zencastr recording. And people are already doing that, but it doesn't work that well if you get too many people in the show and they have to like...
I was talking about like the Twitch approach.
Yeah, kind of. I did a podcast yesterday with a guy who... he has like premium subscribers to his podcast, and one of the benefits they get is he invites them to the Zencastr session so they can listen live while the recording is happening. But and one of his major requests for me is, can you make it so that people are muted right when they join? Because as it is right now, when someone joins, it starts recording them and you can hear them in the thing. So, obviously that sounds like, it'd be an interesting avenue to try and do something.
Well, it sounds like such a better adjacency, because if you go in the direction of the dynamic ads or the small podcaster that needs advertisements, that is such a different area than the audio recording segment. And there's all these entrenched players. There's all these complexities of negotiating the relationships with advertisers. It sounds like a mess.
Yeah, it is. The only reason why I have a draw towards that is basically it doesn't sound fun to build so much. But, the biggest growth in the podcasting space is not in the podcasting creators, although that is growing quite well. It's in the listeners. And so being able to monetize the listener side of the podcasting is, there's financial benefits to that. But I'm going to try and not get too lost in the weeds on that and make sure I get a really good, solid recording platform and build more features and stuff around that before I go in that direction, if I do.
Don't let your database be a black box. Drill down into the metrics of your database with 1-second granularity. Vivid Cortex provides database monitoring for MySQL, Postgres, Redis, MongoDB, and Amazon Aurora. Database uptime, efficiency, and performance can all be measured using Vivid Cortex. Vivid Cortex uses patented algorithms to analyze and surface relevant insights, so users can be proactive and fix performance problems before customers are impacted. If you have a database that you would like to monitor more closely, check out vividcortex.com/sedaily. GitHub, DigitalOcean, and Yelp all use Vivid Cortex to understand database performance. Learn more at vividcortex.com/sedaily and request a demo. Thank you to Vivid Cortex for being a repeat sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. It means so much to us. Yeah, so this is an interesting question from the point of view. So you're a, quote, indie hacker. I mean, I read your Indie Hackers interview. It was pretty interesting. And I think one of the interesting challenges that an indie hacker, I mean, it's not really a challenge, but it's a challenge that an indie hacker has is how do you maintain focus? Because especially once you get a cash cow like Zencastr that makes enough money I assume it makes enough money to sustain you. You've got this project that you're excited about, you're passionate about it. And so the question is like, how do you maintain focus and how do you police yourself? So I'm sure like having a kid helps with that in some sense. But how do you divide because the podcasting space is, like you said, there's so many opportunities, there's so many directions you could go. So how do you focus, and do you like spend your weekends drawing up designs, or while you spend your weekdays just focusing on the bread and butter product? Or how do you assess that from a workflow perspective?
I don't know that I have a great answer for you. I do sometimes just let myself wander and see where I end up, for better or worse. I think maybe the most grounding thing in my day-to-day is like my emails, customer support emails and feature requests. I try and make a conscious effort whenever I'm thinking about something to say to myself, are people asking me for this or not? Because it's so easy to think, oh, this could be cool, and what if I did this? But at the end of the day, a lot of the stuff I come up with is really not something that people are asking for. One of the things that I do get a lot of people asking for that I'm actually trying to hire some help with right now, wink, wink, nod if you're out there, is an iOS app for Zencastr.
Oh.
Because there's a lot of times that people aren't going to be at a computer, or they're too busy, or they just don't have a computer, or whatever, or they just want, the ultimate mobility. And so actually I get a lot of people not so much asking if I have a mobile app, but they ask if people can call in via phone and be recorded.
Yes.
And which was going to sound horrible if I actually did specifically that. But I think the better solution would be to make a mobile app so that someone could get on their iPhone or whatever and then log in from there and then do the recording.
Now, would that just be a web view? Because, I mean, I've had somebody who has done the episode by opening up the browser on their phone and opening up Zencastr in the browser, and it was okay. I mean, it came out okay. I think we had the wave issue that I referred to earlier, probably because of the memory constraints of the phone. But if you're solving that with the Windows 7 fix that we mentioned earlier, then what do you need? Would the iOS app just be like a nice web view?
No, I'd go native with it, and here's why. Even on the desktop, you run into problems with storage space for the backups. The browsers, and justifiably so, limit you to only giving you a quota of about 10% of the existing free hard drive space on the computer, which generally is okay because people generally now have pretty big hard drives, and I show warnings if they're getting low. But people don't have that much space on their phones. And so while I might be able to, especially with these performance updates, get it to work well in a web view on a mobile device under ideal circumstances, you'd have a lot of issues in times where, like, if things went wrong, they didn't have room to save the backups, and there's no way for me to really get around that well in the browsers right now. So just for reliability's sake and performance and everything, I'm going to do a native app.
Speaking of iOS, what do you think of the fact that Apple controls so much of the podcasting space, but they do not have much reason to lean into it because they are the most profitable company in the world?
It does seem like they've upped their interest a bit in the podcasting space since it's kind of gotten its recent revival, but I think they're, I wouldn't be surprised if you see some big acquisitions from Apple at some point. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not a businessman. I don't understand this type of stuff. Whatever I don't know. Who knows what they'll do if they do anything.
Speculate. Who would they acquire?
Well, it just seems really weird to me that they're basically just they've just sat on their podcast directory for since 2005 or something. It's been like 10 years and not much has changed. Maybe it would be something that they integrate. Maybe they'd want to, I don't know, maybe they'd buy somebody like Acast or somebody who has a really big podcast, distribution platform and roll it into their iTunes somehow and integrate things better. Because right now it's quite archaic the way podcasts work. You have to download the files and the analytics are crappy around it and all this stuff. You don't know if anybody actually listened. You just know that they download, but those get on auto play. They auto download. So I think ideally you'd be moving more towards a streaming type of situation, and where you'd be getting good analytics going back and forth about how long did someone listen to this, and where are they at when they listen to it and all that kind of stuff. So I think there's a lot of value in that, and I wouldn't be surprised if, because they're already basically in control of this ecosystem, I wouldn't be surprised if just because they don't want to let go of it, they decide to double down.
Right. So what you're referring to is the fact that if somebody listens to my podcast episode, it is opaque to me whether they have streamed through the first 15 minutes of it or they have downloaded the entire episode. So the analytics don't show if they have listened to, for example, the third ad in the show. Now, I've done surveys that show that people listen to most of the entire show, or most at times they listen to the entire show, but the questionnaire is obviously biased towards the power listeners. Those are the ones that are even responding to the questionnaire. So you don't have good analytics on who is listening to what ads, so you have no idea how to price the ads. So we have this weird inflation when it comes to pre-roll ads, except people can skip the pre-roll ads, except we don't have analytics on who's skipping the pre-roll ads for the same reasons we mentioned earlier. So it is kind of a disaster, and something like Acast does try to fix that. I've had Acast on the show. I've talked to Acast. I consider them friends. Caitlin at Acast is a friend. And I think I've told this to them, like, it sounds like you're trying to boil the ocean with what you're trying to do with Acast. And you're basically trying to dominate the entire iTunes ecosystem, or you're trying to make a new iTunes. Are you biting off more than you can chew? And I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I think if Apple ever decides that they want to maintain control over the podcast ecosystem, that they probably would have to make some acquisitions like that, because people are now working around it and making their own distribution platforms and that are better and do, better for the podcaster, better for the listener. One of the things that drives me crazy, I always have to get on my wife's phone and go in and delete all of her podcasts because it totally fills up her.
Oh my God. I've had to do this twice in the last 2 months.
Yeah, she subscribes to all these ones. She doesn't even listen to half of them anymore, but she's still subscribed. They fill up all the space on her phone, and she goes to try to take a picture when my kid's doing something cute, and it tells her no space, So just
you never have to do that on Netflix.
Right, exactly. Just in that regard, there needs to be some change, and I think it would be in Apple's best interest to make sure that, just so that people enjoy using their devices, that they help change the way that all happens.
But what's so absurd is that, what you're focused on with Zencastr is so rare in this ecosystem. The tools for the podcaster. Like, what does the podcaster want? It seems like the big companies don't even really care. But ironically, the lack of focus on the creator, and it's led to this weird broken ecosystem where stuff is not indexed well, discovery sucks, but it makes it so that it's like this indie sort of thing where it's not like the long tail, right? It's not like, oh, there's the fat head and the long tail. It's just like the really long head, or I don't even know what it would look like, because you have a total variety of listenership amounts. Like, I don't think that it's like if you took one of the charts. I mean, somebody could easily prove me wrong on this. Actually, they couldn't because we don't have good analytics. I don't think it would be a power law distribution of listens. I think it would be like a linear thing where anyway, I should focus my question. What tools do the podcasters need?
Well, I think they certainly need good recording tools, and that's what I'm attacking. But like we kind of already discussed, is the analytics tools. I think another thing is the advertising stuff. I think a lot more people would like to have relationships where podcasters are such a great source of like highly targeted audiences, like the audience.
Yeah.
But since they're so niche, a lot of them are so small that the advertisers don't want to take the time and effort to deal with such small players individually. I think there's an opportunity to kind of, and I think, Acast has kind of done this with their dynamic ad insertion and stuff with their platform. The problem is Acast is very much like, if you want to use our tools, you have to be completely inside of our ecosystem and embrace it completely. And there's a lot of people that might already have, relationships with their own advertisers or don't want to, for whatever reason.
Such as myself.
Right. So it wouldn't make sense for you to go run your show on them and
That's
let
exactly
them just
right.
run. Yeah. So I think there's opportunities there.
That was my issue with Acast. I was like, who wants this? I mean, I guess maybe if you're a brand new podcaster and you have an audience and you're just starting to get ads, then you're okay onboarding with them and moving everything to their infrastructure. It's just like, I think it's like a perfect example of not talking to the customer, right? You look at Acast and you're like, cool, you built this because this is the vision of podcasting, that it works for you. This is not something that works for the podcasters.
Right. And one of my overarching kind of principles with Zencastr is I do want to add more follow-on services for podcasters to use just out of convenience, but I don't want to wall people in, because I know for a fact that there's a lot of people that use Zencastr because it doesn't do too much. A lot of the seasoned podcasters, they already have a host. They've already got advertisers. They've already got a whole workflow with their own audio editor that they love. They don't want all that stuff again. They just want really high quality recordings and then go do all that other stuff. On the other hand, you've got the brand new podcaster who doesn't know what any of that stuff is and would be quite happy to just have you hold their hand through the entire process. So trying to find a good solution to where you're able to hold the hand of the people that want it, but let the other people just use you for what you do really well and then move on. That's my goal.
Okay, so the different areas of the advertising that you could fit yourself into. So right now you've got like the beginning of the podcasting workflow already in Zencastr, right? You can record your podcast, you can add an intro, you can add a little music, you can put auphonic filtering and perfection on it. So the next place you could go is you could say, okay, here's the timestamp where you insert an ad, and then you could have a way to dynamically replace that in the future, and then you also could get into the space where you're brokering relationships with advertisers somehow. So what would be the ideal sequence? So assuming you were going to move into that space, what would be the ideal sequencing?
Matching up advertisers?
No, like in terms of your business. So if you wanted to move into that space where you're adding in the ads, you're facilitating dynamic insertion for the users, and you're somehow brokering relationships with the advertisers themselves, what would be the way that you would sequence that business-wise? And have you thought about like the interface into that world?
Yeah, I've put a little bit of thought into it. Again, I haven't even decided if I want to go in that direction. One of the nice things about Zencastr is because I have kind of a small niche market. Like there's only maybe 100,000 or 200,000 active podcasts in the world. That I don't get competition from like big funded players with tens of millions of dollars. And so because one of my the reason why I built this company was to be financially independent, geographically independent, and also like independent in the decision-making process. I don't want to have to raise money and have a board and have all this other stuff. Businesses can really take on a life of their own and run away with themselves. You have to really aim them properly to get what you want out of it. And so those are some of the considerations around that. If I was going to do it, something that I've envisioned is maybe like a way for like, maybe I would send out maybe whenever you went to your dashboard, I would have a pop-up that says, hey, you're in a desirable niche for advertisers. Would you be interested? And if you click yes, then I add you to a directory that I give access to ad fulfillment agencies to log into and let them browse through all the different, and I would kind of bundle these up into like topic niches, like topic verticals basically. And then I could say, hey, we've got 1.2 million downloads a month in this vertical. And, it's where they're not seeing individual shows. They're seeing a vertical that have ads. And each one of these is like a targeted type, this is a group of this targeted audience.
So if I'm Squarespace and I want to advertise to burgeoning entrepreneurs, I can log in and I can say, okay, I'll choose the vertical burgeoning entrepreneurs. I want to get 100,000 pre-rolls across burgeoning entrepreneurs. And then Zencastr fulfills that order by inserting those ads onto podcasts that use Zencastr.
Yeah, but one of the things that I think is really important for like advertising and podcasting is like the human, like the read-in by the host, more impromptu. Most people don't want to be, for podcast advertising, to be like the radio where it's a break to the sponsors. They want to hear, what do you as the host, the person who I'm developing a relationship with by listening to your show, what do you recommend? What are you endorsing personally? And so what I would kind of want to do is make it so that the advertiser could give some outline instructions of what needs to be said and what needs to be covered, but then still have them all be like organic read-ins by the host. And so when they select this vertical, they give me the instructions, I send that out to all the hosts, and then the hosts would then do their own read-ins and then insert that into the show. I think that's what I would like to see. And I think that's what would be cool for podcasters and for listeners, because I feel like that's one of the really cool things about podcasting is you don't feel like you're being advertised to. You feel like your host is giving you a great tip on what service you should use. And if you're just doing a break to a sponsor with a pre-recorded ad, you lose that, I think.
How do you think about pricing?
It's hard. Nobody's ever going to be happy. You're always going to have people telling you're charging too little or too much. My pricing strategy came from some of the first interviews I did with podcasters when I was asking them, okay, here's the problem. Here's what I think the solution could be. How much would you pay per month? The first guy who gave me a number said $20 a month. And I just stuck with it, for better or worse.
So it's not like related to the costs or anything. It's just like, because I pay $20 a month. I'm absolutely happy for it. I'm totally content to pay $20 a month to have Zencastr running my business. By the way, I would probably pay $80 a month for it.
there's the thing. I think obviously you need to cover your costs. That's a no-brainer. And then you need to be reactive. You need to think about how much this is worth because you don't want to base your pricing on just your cost. You want to base your pricing on how much value you're bringing. If you've done like contract web development and stuff, then that's kind of one of the principles that you kind of try to stick with. I don't know. I think I am going to start to try and offer more higher value services, but so I can charge more for people who have, more needs. But I like the idea of making it something that's affordable for even the hobbyist.
Yeah.
I don't want to force them out. And that's why I have a really great liberal free plan that, most people that use Zencastr don't pay for it. But I've structured those free plans in a way where they don't cost me hardly anything. And so I can do that. And so, yeah, I'll play around with pricing, but what I'd like to do instead of just raising my prices is adding better services and raising prices for those, like add-on services, basically.
Right.
So that,
like advertising related stuff.
Yeah. If I could start doing that, there's value in that. And also the advertising stuff could help me monetize some of the people that aren't paying. That's one of the reasons why I have the free plan is I think I'm going to be able to find ways to monetize those users later, and I don't want to drive them away now.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so we're running up against time. I want to ask just one or two things about music, because you said you were working on this digital audio workstation. You probably thought about this space. I've done a couple shows with, I did a show called GitHub for Musicians about a company called, the name is escaping me right now, but one of the things I find super strange about the internet right now is you can collaborate on almost anything, and yet most of the music that we have on the radio is still 1 to 5 people that have created it together. And you look at a piece of software, and software is so much harder to create than music. I would argue it's harder to create than music. Like Linux. What piece of music can rival the complexity of Linux? But if there were some tool where you could have mass collaboration on a piece of music, then I think it would be totally game-changing. Do you think we're going to get that anytime in the future?
Well, so the company that I was working on before Zencastr was Robot Audio, which was the DAW in the browser. Before that was a company called Soundkeep. Our unofficial tagline was GitHub for music. That was our elevator.
Yes.
And so I've spent a lot of time in this, thinking about this and exploring it. And man, it's the
potential is so tremendous.
Is it though? Here's why I have reservations about that. One is programmers are able to make enough money with their code to not have to worry about, musicians don't make money. They're all hoping that they get this, this 1 in a million breakthrough. Even excellent musicians don't make money. It's the lucky ones that get, it's just so rare that you actually break through to even being able to make a living with it, much less becoming rich. And so they're so protective of anything they've touched that they're not they don't want to share. They want anything they have, this is mine, this is copyrighted, this is, I'm speaking in general terms. Obviously, there's outliers around here, and especially programmers who are musicians, I think, see this differently. Because it would be amazing for, especially electronic musicians, because it's such a derivative art form. You can't sell your music that you make if it samples other audio because of the license. There's so many licensing restrictions around it. So our idea was to try and make like a massive repository of like totally open source music assets that you could then remix and make what you want out of it without having to worry about licensing issues. The problem on top of that as well is most of these guys don't want to just sample any old song or any old thing. They want to sample the hot tune that's on the radio. So there's a lot of dynamics in it that make it not work as well as it might seem like it could work when you think of it just from like a programmer's perspective, like GitHub. Another thing about it is music is so subjective. Programs does it do what it needs to do or not? Obviously there's some design. If it has a UI, there's design and stuff that can be subjective, but a lot of it is like this works or it doesn't. It works as designed and does what it needs to do or it doesn't. With music, what we found when we built Soundkeep is that a lot of people were annoyed that someone else was messing with their music, or they might want to collaborate with someone else, but they were very selective about who that might be. And they had to have a very good stylistic kind of match with someone to even consider wanting to work with them. So those are some of the problems with that idea. Not saying it's insurpassable. And there have been some companies that have since then started to make some things like that work. But Splice, I think, is one that came around after Soundkeep, and then there's a few of them out there. But I think a lot of them have gone down the route of like doing.
Is it Blend?
I've forgotten now.
Blend.io. That's the one that I interviewed.
Okay, yeah. A lot of them have gone down the road of like offering like sample packs from
right
big,
yeah,
which is cool, but it's not that GitHub for music idea. Yeah.
That's right.
I think Splice or one of them has an interesting thing where if you pay for their subscription, they basically let you like rent to own soft synths, which is cool. It's a totally different idea than what originally. But I think that's the thing, is to monetize that space is challenging. You have to find some interesting other ways to do it. And even doing that is tough because like someone can literally go on a BitTorrent and download a 10 gigabyte pack of samples. That's, you know how many samples that is? And it's how free that is, So anyway, it's a tough space, but it's fun. It's interesting. I wish I went to when I was still working on Soundkeep, I went to the SF Music Tech Summit, and this is when I started.
I went to that.
Did you? Okay.
Oh, I actually went. I went this year. It was super fun, super interesting.
Oh, okay. This was maybe in 2012 or 11, I think. Yeah, really great crowd, really fun and interesting. But this is when I started to realize maybe I needed to think about a different business to get into. Because
wait, okay, unpack that, please. Because I think I know what you meant, but please unpack that.
Well, the very first, like the opening keynote of this event was basically the guy, I've forgotten his name, but the guy who runs the summit got up there and he was basically saying, and to preface this, the biggest sponsor of this event is BitTorrent. Or at least it was the year I was there. Their banners were everywhere. And,
oh, wow. I didn't know that.
What's his name? I've forgotten his name. I met him there. But the guy who invented BitTorrent was there running around. And so basically the keynote of this event was the guy who runs the event getting up there and saying, how do we make money? Does anybody have any ideas? And I was like, this is not good. So...
Well, here's the okay. So we're totally going over here and like totally going into a random topic, but I'll just say like my 2 cents on this. As much as I liked the conference, it was almost like this, like the coal miners of Middle America who are like bring back our coal jobs, and it's just like a bunch of musicians that are pining for various versions of the past. And some of them who are looking forward to the future and thinking of ways to form-fit old technologies to slightly new workflows. but I sensed in general a lack of understanding for the potential of technology. People were basically like, hey, look, I built a new synthesizer drum pad. Or like, hey, I built a drumstick where you can put a sensor on it, and if you put on headphones, you can hear the drum playing in your ears. It's like, okay, that's kind of cool, but where is the like harnessing the power of the internet and network effects and so on? Like, I don't know. It's just, I honestly came away a little disappointed.
I think it was similar when I was there. There was a lot of
It felt antiquated. I was like, are we seriously? This is what music technology is.
Yeah, there was a lot of people lamenting the demise of the how
it was a pity party.
Yeah, and a lot of people distressed about how are we gonna what are we gonna do next year? Things are just getting worse, and not a lot of the one thing that I did see that I thought was nice is I saw a few talks about people saying the people that were the most distressed I think were the middlemen, because they're the ones.
Yes, that's right.
They're the ones that are totally out of a job, because now the way for a musician to make it is to connect more directly with your audience and be completely, share and be open, do live streams, live concerts. Right. And the distributors were not interested in that idea really. So yeah, but when I went, what I saw was a cash starved market, and that's not a great way to make money really.
I felt like the biggest star at the event, and this is so strange, was DistroKid. You know what DistroKid is, right?
Yeah, he was there. He was there when the Pug, right? The Pug.
Yes, Pud. So this guy, oh my God, I want to have this guy on my show. I forgot his name, but you should look up Pud, P-U-D, on Twitter, and he's made all these different products. He's this guy who's made a bunch of different products. I think he made Tiny Letter, which sold to MailChimp. He made a bunch of other stuff, and then he made this thing, DistroKid, which is basically like anybody can put their music on Spotify and iTunes and Amazon and all these different things with one click. And it's kind of similar to Zencastr in the sense that it's like $20 a year, and you just never unsubscribe, because if you're a musician, you put out one album a year or a couple albums a year, and it's like when you put it out, you might as well throw it on Spotify if it only costs you $20 a year to do that. But it's funny because like that is our innovation. It's like distribution. Like that is, he was the star of the show, and he was distribution. What about the music creation? Where is the music creation, the collaboration? Like, why is that? Anyway, that is totally not the focus of this episode. We should totally wrap up.
Well, I think that there is opportunity for cool stuff to happen. Like, the reason why I got into doing Soundkeep and the GitHub for Music was me and some friends did the Node Knockout 2011, I think. And we made basically a collaborative beat.
It's a hackathon?
Yeah, it's a hackathon for Node.js and JavaScript, basically. And we won the hackathon with this thing called 8-bit beats. And what it was is you could have up to like 8 people join this room, and each one of them got basically a MIDI roll that was like 8 beats long, or 8 measures long. And each one of them got a different thing. Like one person got the drums, one person got a different synth melody and some other things. And it was really cool. What we were watching was people making music online together. Obviously it wasn't like, fully fleshed out songs or anything, but it was just this ever evolving beat that people would come in and add things. And sometimes someone would come in and just draw like a penis in the MIDI roll, and it didn't sound very good, but often it actually like came together, and there's this really crazy like amorphous beat that was evolving, and we're like, wow, this is really cool. It's obviously fun for people to use, and maybe we can do something here. But man, it was really hard to take that idea and move it into something that was truly valuable enough to pay for, and not just like a fun novelty thing, But that's the thing. Music is kind of just a fun, like, the thing is like, someone told me this a long time ago, and I think it's true. He said the business model behind music is that you can get laid after the show. And like, I think in a lot of senses that's true. Like, people are going to make music for free just for all the fringe benefits. It's not like something that has to be monetized. It has to be a business. Like, it's just fun. Like, and it's an aspirational art. Like everybody, imagines themselves up on stage playing to a huge, theater or whatever. But like when I go out and I buy a guitar or a synthesizer, like it's a hobby. It's fun. It's not like a business investment. And trying to put too much money around it maybe just kind of ruins.
But it's not okay. But it's not even about money. So I remember, I think I must have been like 10 or 11 years old when, Postal Service, right? The band Postal Service. Okay, so Postal Service came out with their first album, and I remember seeing on MTV, it was like Kurt Loder, or, one of these old MTV anchors, and they're talking about like how Postal Service made their first album, and it was like, oh yeah, we sent each other tracks over email, and we just sent it back and forth until we got a good album. And like at the time, that was like revolutionary. And here we are in 2017, and that is still the best that we can do in terms of collaboration, except instead of sending email, it's like you share over Dropbox. It's like, what has gone wrong where that is the best standard of innovation that we have in the music space?
Well, but here's the thing. There are collaborative DAWs out there. Let's see. I can't even remember what it's called, but there's one...
Well, Ableton is. Splice is.
In a way, yeah, Ableton is. Ohm Studio is one that's been around for a while that really focused. That's like their key feature is like you can do stuff really collaboratively with other people. But the thing is people are so entrenched and attached to, like, learning the ins and outs of a DAW with all the plugins that go with it is like a very personal thing, and it takes a lot of time, and people don't want to move. Even if you're slightly better than the other one, it's a hard transition for people to make. And, there's these big entrenched players that you have to be really excellent, even if you offer some cool collaboration features to get people to move away from it. And so I think what's more likely to happen is that you're going to see, well, Bitwig is, I think, one of the more promising players on the market. They're doing a lot of new cool stuff. And I think maybe eventually they've been able to like get a lot of the Ableton crowd to switch over to them, and I think maybe they'll be the ones that kind of take it further into the future with the collaboration.
This is the thing I don't even understand, which is that, well, okay, so Blend tried to solve this problem by just making it so that the standard is you export all your stuff to WAV files or MP3 files or whatever, and like that's an obvious layer of interoperability, but nobody wanted to do it. And I think this is like, okay, sure, like there's such a burden of the workflow. If you want to collaborate with somebody in a different digital audio workstation, okay, you have to export everything to different WAV files. What a headache to manage. It would be so much easier if you just collaborate with somebody who's using the same digital audio workstation as you. But anyway, I think we've sort of covered this topic. Like there's a cultural problem as epitomized by the digital, what is it, the Music of the Future Summit or whatever it's called. I love that summit, Tech Music Summit. I'm going to have that guy on the show. I really want to talk to him again. But you've got the cultural problem. You've got the technical problem of these different walled garden digital audio workstations, which are basically like you might as well be talking about Windows versus Mac versus Linux in terms of walled garden and interoperability. And that is enough to partition people such that we have a completely stagnant music industry as far as I'm concerned. When I look out and I listen to the music that is out there, I'm like, okay, this is completely stagnant because you don't have the collaboration that we have in these other industries.
I don't know that I agree. Okay. I don't know that I disagree either. I mean, I think you're definitely right in some regards, but I think the really cool thing now that's happening in the music space is, and perhaps this is in part, PUD is helping with this, is that it's a lot easier for people to get. I don't know that the big problem was so much the collaboration problem. I mean, that's an interesting problem, and I hope that there's progress made there. I think the big problem is people who are making their music couldn't be heard as easily.
Or get paid.
Now that's becoming easier, and I think that's cool. But
PUD's a hero.
There's never been a golden era of music where being a good musician meant you were going to make money, right? So it's not like we've really lost that. That was never the case. But now people through SoundCloud and through Spotify, I find bands all the time on Spotify now that like nobody listens to, at least according to their listen counter, that I'm like, wow, these guys are great. I'm so glad that I'm be able to find them, and hopefully they'll So I think that there's been big improvements in that area. But the problem with the class, like when I was working on SoundKeep, I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I was working for Techstars, which is a tech accelerator there. And I went to one of the partners of the fund behind Techstars, Foundry Partners, is, am I getting his name right? Jason Mendelson, I think.
Yeah.
He has a band there in town, and they do shows, and like everybody from the tech scene comes, and so he was kind of the one that I looked to for advice on, this is what we're working on. Do you think this is cool? And what, and he wasn't having any of it. And here's why. And he brought up a really good point. He's like, look, this is the complete, but this is also the type of musician that he is. He's not an electronic musician, but I still get why he said this. He's like, this is a complete antithesis of what I'm looking for when I'm making music. He's like, I want to be with my friends in the studio, jamming together. I want live interaction.
That's so retrograde.
It is, but it isn't. I mean, I love that too. I can't deny that that's more fun than looking at a screen and collaborating with someone.
That is the equivalent of saying, okay, we all need to work in the office together.
Yeah, I mean, but still, if you could have your buddy there, like you riff, I think it's much easier to riff off of each other.
No, but here's the thing is that it's actually not, because if you're, like, that's the experience. So if you're talking about people who are working with, okay, yeah, we are siloed into roles. I play guitar, you play drums, you play saxophone, you play piano. We've all got our partition of roles. That's fine. But if you've got people that grew up working in digital audio workstations like me, I need to control my workflow, and my instrument is the computer keyboard, and that is not a two-person instrument. So if I'm going to collaborate with somebody else who is a full-on digital musician, there's not room for two people in the studio.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fair point. I can see both sides of it, I suppose.
Me too. Okay.
Anyway, what's this podcast about?
Yes, thank you for attending Music Engineering and Debate and Strong Opinions Radio. Or, yeah, okay. We'll call it quits, Josh. Thank you for coming on the show. Thank you for producing a tool that has become a backbone of my workflow. And thanks for staying on for so long. Usually this only goes 60 minutes, but okay. Anyway, I'm going to stop the Zencastr recording now. Thanks to Symfano for sponsoring Software Engineering Daily. Symfano is a custom engineering shop where senior engineers tackle big tech challenges while learning from each other. Check it out at symfano.com/sedaily. That's SYMPHONO.com/SEDaily. Thanks again to Symfano for being a sponsor of Software Engineering Daily for almost a year now. Your continued support allows us to deliver this content to the listeners on a regular basis.
Wow!